There's no better way to align your life and money than to align with giving. And today we're going to chop it up about aligning your life and money with your charitable ways and save on taxes. So let's chop it up. Hello, I'm Dr. Preston Cherry, founder and CEO of Concurrent Financial Planning. And today we have a special guest, one of the best minds in the world, I would think, on planned charitable giving, director of the Charitable Financial Planning Program at Texas Tech, the School of Financial Planning, Dr. Russell James. Oh my goodness. My friend and mentor, it's a pleasure having you in such a renowned brain and oh my gosh, an influencer on the charitable giving space. Russell, we're glad to have you here.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Cherry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share with you about my favorite topic, of course, and that is charitable giving and charitable financial planning.
Yes, for sure, for sure. First of all, just a quick background. I mean, I think you're well renowned for just being a kind person, but how did you get into charitable financial planning? How did it align with who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. Well, so it started out really with going to law school. I actually went for the purpose of getting into litigation, but along the way found that I really enjoyed classes in gift and estate taxation and planning and estate planning and property law and all of these sorts of things all kind of gelled together. And so I ended up doing a couple of things. I had an estate planning practice for a number of years as a lawyer, but also worked in planned giving for a small residential college and combined both things in my work. So really was involved with the charitable side of things from the very beginning. Now, I guess a bit like you, at a certain point, I decided the whole college professor thing is what I wanted to do. And that's when I went back and got my PhD from the University of Missouri. And my dissertation was on charitable giving, actually religious charitable giving in that context. And so did that. Ended up working very much in the major gifts fundraising space as a college president for about 5.5 years. And since then, I've just been focused on teaching and research in the classroom, first for a number of years at the University of Georgia, and now, of course, at Texas Tech University for almost 15 years. So that's a little bit of how I got to where I am today.
Yes, well, thank you for that background. You mentioned two words. We got charitable giving and then planned giving. I like to share that with my clients a lot, that when we're talking about charitable giving, it doesn't always have to be about death. And you talk about that a lot in your books and your lectures. And death scares people. And I share with people a lot that, when we talk about leaving a legacy and estate planning, it's more about love than it is about death. And you could do a lot in life. So that word planned giving means a lot. Can you unpack that a little bit, charitable giving and planned giving and why that means so much about making an emphasis on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've pointed out something that's very accurate. That a lot of people, if you use the term planned giving, they either have no idea what you're talking about, or they think it's just about estate planning. And although that can be part of it, planned giving is really any time that we combine those areas of financial planning with charitable giving. Anytime you do something other than just the normal kind of writing a check or leaving a few dollars. So oftentimes, instead of plan giving, I'll use the term major gifts of assets. Now, that makes a difference actually, and we start with the basic concept in financial planning, charitable financial planning, which is this. If I make a gift of an asset, say it's some shares of stock that have gone up in value, I not only get a tax deduction of the value of those shares, but I also get to avoid paying those capital gains taxes that I would have to pay otherwise. In fact, one of the very first things we talk to clients about is the notion of never give cash. Now, of course, I'm being obnoxious there with saying never, but the notion is that if you have appreciated assets in your portfolio, especially if they're publicly traded securities, well, what we want to do is we want to donate those appreciated assets and use the cash to buy brand new assets. And the cool thing about this, Dr. Cherry, is that you can actually get rid of the capital gains in your portfolio without changing your portfolio. So let's say you've owned some shares of Apple stock and they've gone way up in value, and you're thinking about making a cash gift to an organization. Well, I would say, no, no, don't do that. Give those old shares of Apple stock to the organization and instead use the cash to then immediately purchase brand new shares of Apple stock. Now, there is no waiting period because this is gain property, not loss property. We don't have to change the portfolio at all, but we've wiped out all those capital gains in the portfolio. So this is an example of where we're using some financial planning. We're using some planned giving, but it has nothing to do with estate planning. It is just how to give smarter. And so that's an example of the kind of conversations we want to have. And whenever we start talking about gifts of assets, well, now we're moving beyond those disposable income gifts or pocket change gifts, and we're starting to have wealth conversations. What do you want to do with your wealth? What are your values? What kind of a legacy do you want it to have both while you're alive and even beyond that? So that's kind of how we get into that conversation step by step, rather than just starting with, "Hey, you know you're going to die. Let's talk about that."
Right. And you mentioned a lot of things there. And thank you for that case study. And a lot of people window dress when they're talking about contributing stock and cash. And they see that in the tax code, they say, well, I can donate cash and get 60% of my AGI and rather than 30% when I'm donating stock. But they don't see all those benefits that you unpack there, and where you can use that cash to, buy that cost basis now and reset that portfolio. And so, yeah, unpack that just a little bit more about not seeing that window dressing 60% of AGI cash and using what you were talking about.
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind is that this has become so much easier than it ever has been in the past, and that's because of the use of donor advised funds. So let's
Yeah.
say I support, 4 or 5 or 6 different organizations. Maybe some of them are small and they don't really know how to accept gifts of securities. It's not a problem now because if I've got my donor advised fund, I can just ship the securities into that donor advised fund, take that full tax deduction for the current value as long as I've owned it for a year or more. And I, again, instead of donating the cash, I use the cash to immediately purchase replacement shares in that same company. And I can do that without having to communicate with the nonprofit about how to accept these kinds of gifts. And instead, I just sell it in the DAF and then ship the cash out from the DAF to the different organizations. So it's definitely a lot easier than it has been in the past. Now, you do point out something that for those who are donating a lot relative to their income, that even though the deduction size is the same with the gift of cash or a gift of securities, it is the case that there's a limit on how much of your AGI you can wipe out with these different deductions. So the first thing you want to do is, well, at least for the first 30% of your AGI you're wiping out, right? You want to do that through the appreciated asset gifts. And then we can look at other kinds of gifts beyond that. The other thing to keep in mind is that those AGI limitations, those actually tend to apply only to a really small share of the population. A lot of people misunderstand those and they think, well, what is this for Buddhist monks or, people that are living off of 10% of their income? And in fact, these limitations aren't for that. These limitations are for high wealth individuals, because high wealth individuals, ultra high net worth folks, they tend to have low reportable income. They hire folks like you and me to make sure that that's the case. Well, the problem is if they give even a small, reasonable share of their wealth, it tends to kind of swamp their
Mhm.
reportable income. And that's when we get into these income limitations. And those are those kind of special cases where we care about that. But for most folks, they're not really in that space of giving more than a quarter of their annual income to charity. But once we do get beyond that level, then we can start looking at what kind of a mix of gifts are we interested in.
Yes, yes. I love when you mention the DAFs, and we're shortening up words so much now. Donor advised. My mom hates them. By the way, she's like, she says, say the whole word, right? So, but
I like that. Yes.
oh my goodness. But yes, now the DAF. So bunching up the contributions in one year is
Mhm.
highly useful when you're talking about taking advantage and reducing your taxes in one year. And I always like to say is like when you have tax or contribution or reducing taxes in one year, and you have these type of contribution aspirations, and you say, you know what, I want to donate to this charity or that charity. And I'm getting all these calls and all this, and you'd be like, you know what? Just contact my DAF. Just put them all in one bucket. That way you don't have to pick up those phones. You know what? Just hit the decline button on the phone because you have a DAF and you can bunch all those. So that's another advantage of having a donor advised fund. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You point out two great advantages, and certainly bunching is something. If you're in a situation where you say, "Oh, well, I can't use charitable deductions because my deductions aren't meeting the minimums for the standard deduction, so I just take the standard deduction anyway." Well, if you are actually giving enough over the course of say 3 or 4 years, that's more than that standard deduction. Then yeah, you need to do exactly what you just said, which is if you've got the financial flexibility, pick a target year and go ahead and stuff into that DAF 4 or 5 years worth of giving. And then you can take that deduction all in that first year when you put the money into the donor advised fund. Sorry, I won't use the acronym there. But you take that big deduction in that year because there's no additional deduction for when you ship the money out. You point out something else that I think is helpful psychologically to be effective as a donor. And that is instead of getting each request and kind of having this knee jerk request where, well, let's do 50 here and 50 here and 75 here. Instead, you can accumulate your charitable fund in a donor advised fund. And oftentimes, what people will find is that they can move beyond these kind of small, you might call them pat on the head gifts, and do something substantial that
yeah,
over time you accumulate enough where you say, well, I could do something kind of meaningful with this size of a gift. And so that's a cool thing that can happen, especially if you're kind of regularly contributing to that donor advised fund and building it up. And so that can make the giving experience more enjoyable when we can do big concentrated things that have that visualizable impact. It's more fun to give in that way.
for sure, for sure. Now I love me a good sunset, Dr. James. Oh my goodness, but some sunsets are not very good. And we have this estate tax sunset coming up. And estate taxes doesn't affect too many households.
Mhm.
0.2%
Mhm.
right now. I mean, right now it's upwards to 13 million. I'm rounding, and then for 26 million for couples. So it doesn't affect too many people. But with the sunset, it could potentially affect a lot more households when you're talking about 5 million. And that's really attainable for a lot of households as far as net worth is concerned when you're starting to pass on assets. So I mean, that's going to affect a lot of people that we serve as far as households are concerned. So I mean, what are the things that we should be thinking about when we're talking about planned giving
Mhm.
right now?
Sure. Well, of course, whenever we get in the business of predicting what Congress is or isn't going to
Oh,
do, we're kind of
yeah.
in a tricky space. But you're absolutely right that we have not only the estate tax exemption levels are scheduled to come back down or to sunset, but also those standard deduction levels. So that affects your charitable giving because, of course, more likely to be able to use those itemized deductions. Here's something to keep in mind because you point out the very important fact that for most people, they say, well, look, I don't have those millions and millions of dollars that it takes to even worry about estate taxes. And what I would say is, do you have an IRA? Do you have a 401k? Do you have any kind of a qualified plan? And if the answer is yes, well, you do have to worry about taxes in your estate planning. Now, you say you may not have to worry about estate taxes in your estate planning, but you sure enough do have to worry about income taxes in
Right.
your estate planning. And the reason that's important is that if someone has a cause that's been important in their life, the very first dollars that we want to leave in an estate plan are those IRA 401k qualified plan dollars. And the reason is if family members get any of that money, they got to pay income taxes on that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
any of that money that goes to charity, there's no income taxes that are due on that. And that affects everyone. Even if your net worth is only $10,000 and you got half of it in an IRA, hey, you need to worry about tax planning in your estate even if you don't have any concern about estate taxes. So those are some things to keep in mind. And in fact, those taxes have in some ways become even more painful because we've got new rules from the IRS that says if somebody inherits that other than the spouse, they're going to have to start pulling that money out even faster, all of it within 10 years. And now it appears the IRS is saying that no, they've got to start pulling it out in year one right away and paying those taxes. That makes the taxes more painful. That means it is smarter to avoid those taxes. And how do you do that? Well, if you've got causes that have been important in your life, that's where we start with our charitable planning in the estate.
Yeah, yeah. And I got a couple of things here, Dr. James. Well, what you mentioned something, and a lot of folks like to try to predict about what Congress is going to do, and you get a lot of fear mongering. I'm not a fan of it, and I mean the industry
Mhm.
and advisors, and you start hearing all this stuff in the media and the industry news rags, and there's all this stuff about what we should be doing. You got to jump to conclusions. I'm a fan of waiting a little bit longer to doing any type of massive knee jerk reactions to planning because we've seen over the last decade and a half that some of the more popular laws, even with Social Security, we have a lot of fear mongering around Social Security. It's really not going anywhere. Right. And these major policies tend to, with minor adjustments, tend to stay around. What are your thoughts about not to say we should ignore the policy sunsetting or coming to needing adjustment. What do you say about making knee jerk reactions?
Yeah, so, the only good thing about that is if we use that as an excuse to get people to do the things they ought to be doing anyway, right? So if you can get them to, let's go ahead and get this planning done because we've got all of
Yeah,
these changes coming up, then okay, that's fine. But legitimately, this notion of, hey, we're going to be able to predict what is or isn't going to happen, it's just not the way things work. In fact, I gave up in this prediction category years ago because the estate tax itself was scheduled to sunset, to disappear, to go away for a year back in 2010. And I spent years attending these continuing education conferences for estate planning lawyers that always began with, but of course, we know Congress isn't going to let that happen because, we would just have no estate tax for a year and then it would come back. That would be complete nonsense. And you know what? Congress let it happen. And we had no estate tax for 1 year, and then it all came back the next year. Makes no sense on any level, but it just shows our inability to predict what Congress is going to do, even with something as blatantly ridiculous as letting it expire for 1 year and then come back the next year. So at that point in my career, I said, that's it. I'm done. I am not going to be in the prediction business from this point forward. So you make an excellent point. Yeah, it's helpful to kind of keep that ear to the ground. It's helpful to maybe use some of that to motivate people to do the right things that they should have
right,
been doing anyway.
right.
But no, we can't ultimately plan based upon what we're guessing is going to happen with legislation. I don't really think, that's a road to go down. If there is going to be sunsetting, yeah, you could get some things ready, but wait until it's a 30 days from happening before you execute any documents and start with strategies for that. And again, even those strategies, they're only going to apply to a very tiny share of the population that is already in an estate tax situation. and they want to use up those high exemptions before they potentially disappear when they sunset after 2025.
Absolutely. I want to get into a cool kind of creating retirement income strategy with some plan giving here in a bit. But I want to ask you one more kind of question related to not letting the tax tail wag the dog, so to speak. I want to share with folks that, it's not a problem paying taxes, not sometimes or even all the time, because you do need your money sometimes and a lot of the times for retirement or living now. So I share with folks that it is okay to pay taxes in order to live your lifestyle in retirement. It's very key to be charitably inclined in order to have a value base. This has to be something that you really hold dear to you, and it's part of your aspiration. What are your thoughts about that? Unpacking that a little bit about it's a person having a value system and having an aspiration to do so, and not necessarily needing the bucket of money in order to support their lifestyle.
Yeah, well, Dr. Jerry, you're pointing out something that is where we get a complete split between what theory says people should do and what people actually do. Let me explain what I mean. There is this notion that we have that, we save up money for retirement. And then once we hit whatever that retirement age is, let's call it 65, then we tell that 65-year-old, the way that you have lived for the first 60 plus years of your life, now do the opposite. And you know what they do? They don't do that. In
Right.
fact, when we look at national data on, say, for example, the top 6% of wealth holders, did you know their rate of wealth accumulation actually is higher in their 70s than it was in their 60s? Then it goes even higher in their 80s than it was in their 70s. And believe it or not, their rate of wealth accumulation is higher in their 90s than it was in their 80s. So this comes back to the notion that kind of savers save and spenders spend. And it's great to save up, but then what, right? There is this notion of what are you going to do with your wealth? And so that's where I think a lot of people, especially people that may be involved with financial planners because they have some accumulation, well, they kind of don't know what to do, or they don't do it the right way. It makes them uncomfortable just to spend money. They spend all of their lives saving up. But to have that shift of mindset, to understand what can you do to enjoy your wealth. And part of that is going to be, look, once we get to a certain age, like, I don't want to, go out to an extra fancy restaurant. I like where I normally go. I don't necessarily want to go all over the world. That's a big hassle. And so then start thinking about what kind of an impact would you enjoy seeing? And in fact, yeah, you can do that in the estate plan, but why not see it today? See what kind of an impact you could make to make the world a better place, to really reflect your values, to do something meaningful with your money beyond just, okay, well, whoever dies with the most toys wins kind of a concept. But no, we can do something helpful with that can be really an enjoyable experience as we think about what do we use this wealth for in retirement, and how does that affect our lifestyle based upon our values and what's important to us.
Yes. Oh, so many gems there. So let's use, anything's realistic. I mean, you could have a 15, 20, 30, 50, $100 million estate. That's all. I talk about abundance and massive abundance all the time. If you achieve that in life, fantastic. But let's dial the number down a little bit. Let's say anywhere between 3 and 10 million. All right. That's achievable for a lot of Americans or even people around the world. All right. And let's use your case study, like you say. These folks have they're living a nice lifestyle. They want to go to their restaurant down the street. They've already been to a few places around the world. They have some quality goods and services already around their household. They're living all right. What are some strategies that folks can, let's say they have a couple of paintings on the wall. I've heard of that one. I've even suggested it, donate some paintings to a trust and generating some income, maybe a second house. What are some of those strategies that folks can, now that they have this value-based charitable incline, they have this planned gift that they want to impact on the world? What are some of those, and as they say as wholesalers, stories in the bag that you have? He's like, you know what? These are some cool strategies that people can use for planned giving.
Yeah, so I think it starts with that idea of what are you trying to accomplish? One way to think of it is this way. What's the most meaningful thing that you could do with your money? Because as an advisor, once you identify what it is that you would like to accomplish, then I've got all kinds of bags of tricks to help you do that in a smarter way. And by smarter, I mean help you do that more efficiently, where you can actually make a bigger impact, get the government to kick in a bigger share of those gifts by doing effective planning. And so it all starts with kind of the roadmap of, well, tell me where you'd like to get to. What kind of an impact would you like to make? What's meaningful to you? What's the most meaningful thing you could do with your money? And that is not something that's limited to folks that have, several more zeros after their net worth than many of us or even our clients. So it really starts with, what do you want to accomplish? Now, once we get that, then before we get into all of the techniques, and Dr. Cherry, I spend 2 semester-long courses talking about all the crazy techniques you can do to accomplish this. But I think we start with something psychological, which is exactly that word you just used, this word of abundance. What does that mean? Abundance means having extra. So we first need to identify what is the source of fear that would keep you from sharing this in an enjoyable way? Well, it depends on the person. Are you afraid of living too long? Not a problem. We've got financial planning strategies, annuities, and other things that can make sure that you can live to 120 and you're going to be fine. Is the source of fear maybe a long-term care, nursing home? Okay, well, we can plan for that as well. Whatever that source of fear might be, we need to address that first, because then once we've kind of addressed that, then it sort of loosens the grip on holding every dime tightly and then just dying with it all instead of enjoying it, right? So if we can address that source of fear, then we can move from wealth to abundance. Abundance is where we say, hey, I've got extra, actually. I feel comfortable with this amount and taking care of all of these concerns, and I've got extra. And so now, since I've got extra, I can actually enjoy that extra. One of the ways to enjoy it, beyond just, hey, can we stuff in more consumption, is to make a difference, is to make an impact with it. And then that comes back to, what kind of an impact do you want to make? What would be most meaningful to you? What connects with your life story and your values? What connects with your people? Once we've identified that, then we've got all kinds of effective strategies to help you make that kind of an impact.
Absolutely. And oh man, you're speaking my language there with the, psychology of it all, and abundance, and unpacking your why, and mitigating limiting beliefs and fears. Oh man, you just stirred the whole pot there, Dr. James. Oh my goodness. Oh man. And like you said, you have to figure out those and unpack and investigate those areas before we get to the strategies, because without that, you don't have the strategies. I get asked all the time, well, when are we going to get to the strategies? And what's all that soft stuff have to do with the money? And I say everything, because it does help align the strategy. Something like, all the acronyms. Now we're back at the acronyms, right? But,
Right.
but something like a CRAT, charitable remainder annuity trust. Those are fantastic. And folks, and that's part of plan giving. We have now investigated our why and what our purpose and what we need. And it meets all of if we, taking a case study, all of those checkpoints.
Mhm.
Yes, we're charitable inclined. Yes, we need an income. Yes, we want to make an impact on folks. Yes, we're alive. We're not dead. And yes, when we do pass, we're still leaving a legacy. Let's unpack that one thing before we jump. How are something like a charitable remainder annuity trust help folks? And it's usable by, affluent folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we start with the idea of, hey, I want to make a charitable impact. Maybe I want to leave a share of my estate to a cause that's been meaningful to me. And then we just look at, okay, here's the impact you want to make. What's holding you back? What are the barriers? And one of the barriers might be, all of my money is tied up in an asset, can't really sell it because capital gains tax will just, crush me if I sell that thing, and I need to provide for my income during my life, or maybe the income for both me and a spouse. Well, that's when we can get into some creative planning. You mentioned the charitable remainder trust. That allows us to take that asset, set it aside, put it in our trust basket, and then sell it with no upfront capital gains taxes. We can take payments off of that for our entire life or multiple lives, and we get an upfront charitable tax deduction. Why? Because at the end of life, that's when whatever is left over goes to the charity. So we have the tax advantages that really stack up. We have the lifetime income that is so much higher than if we just sold an asset, got hit with the capital gains tax right up front, and had to try to earn that income just from whatever was left over. And we also get to make that charitable impact. So, again, these are the kinds of things that once a person decides the kind of impact they want to make, then we look at what the barriers are that are preventing them from making that impact. Then we look at the different strategies to address those barriers so that they can make the impact that they want to make. And it is a situation where sometimes people want to start out by talking about, well, are we going to take a plane, a train, a car, or how do the mechanics of this Boeing work? And I want to start with, well, do you even know where you're going, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, we can put all that stuff aside for right now. So that's why we need to start with those conversations of what is your ideal world. And then we can work on what are the barriers and what are the techniques that can help us overcome those barriers to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. James, as always, thank you for dropping these gems. You always have a book or something that you're working on. Well, where can people find you and what's your latest work?
Yeah, sure. So you can find all my stuff for free at encouragegenerosity.com. If you go on Amazon, you want to kill some trees, you can get the paper versions of them. But I share all my stuff for free there, so you are welcome to jump onto that. A lot about charitable giving and nonprofits on that website.
All right. And follow Dr. James on LinkedIn. I promise you a lot of other people do. All right. Thank you for coming on the show, Dr. James. I really appreciate you. All
Thanks,
right.
Dr. Cherry.
Absolutely. If you like what you feel, heard, and seen on the show, like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be chopping it up next time. And we'll see you soon. Cheers. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, seen, and feel to help you achieve your wealth and well-being journey, then like, share, and subscribe to the Life Money Balance channel. And if you're ready, visit the website and schedule an appointment. And be on the lookout for the next LMB lesson. Cheers.